Saturday's Triple Crown Showdown is an animated race created by Inspired Entertainment. It features the 13 past Triple Crown winners traveling 1.25 miles at historic Churchill Downs. The virtual race will air on NBC approximately 5:45 Eastern Time. And to join me, breaking it down, the Muscle Man, James Scully, and Ed DeRosa. And James, let's start with you. How did you tackle the comparison of horse racing greats from different eras?
Well, Joe, I think it's basically we're talking about 8 horses from the 20s, 30s, and 40s because everybody's pretty familiar with the last 5 Triple Crown winners. And to me, it really just comes down to race records. And there's a bunch of different elements to that, like how many races they won, what races they won, did they set any track records, if they raced against older horses as a 3-year-old, how did they fare? And basically, I'm just ranking those horses by category. For example, a horse like Gallant Fox that won 9 of 10 starts in 1930. He really ran slow races for that era, was criticized at the time. And he was a horse that really relished longer distances as well, where he was able to like stay up either on the lead or close to the lead on slow paces. When he did lose, he dropped far back. And like, so in this virtual Kentucky Derby field, he'd be up against it. He could be 15 lengths back in the early stages.
And Ed, there are no speed figures for a lot of these horses from different eras. How did you go about comparing them to the recent horses?
Yeah, I kind of just started with the point that Secretariat ran the best Derby we've seen in the 145-year history of the race, and then worked from there. But, you know, he's not invincible. He did lose races, some before the Derby, some after. So, you know, I guess there's some pause for there, knowing he can be beat. I guess the final question for me was, are we taking this as they only had their 2- and 3-year-old years, and we're looking at them, how they ran on Derby Day? Or do you consider their whole career and say, hey, we know what they're capable of even after the Triple Crown, or in Secretariat's case, the Triple Crown, since his Belmont is probably the best race of all time. And using that is basically my method of judging, and certainly landed on Secretariat as the most likely winner. But, you know, James actually talked me onto Count Fleet a little bit when we were discussing on Twitter. So it would be odds dependent for me at 1 to 10. I'm against Secretariat. Certainly at the 7 to 2 morning line price, though, I'd be taking out alone.
Well, let's stay on Secretariat. And how does he get beat in this race? You made him the even money favorite. What scenario do you foresee of him not crossing the wire first?
I think it would almost have to be a Smarty Jones in the Belmont scenario, where, you know, some of the jockeys on the horses who maybe don't have as big a shot gang up on him, so to speak. You know, we know he doesn't need the lead. He just, you know, moves like a tremendous machine, as we know from his Belmont. I mean, he's a locomotive. It's really hard for me to see him taking enough pressure that he's not the one that makes first run. One thing to remember with the Kentucky Derby is it really doesn't favor deep closers. Even Mind That Bird was made the lead by the 8th pole, and Secretariat has that kick where he can go on the far turn and then just becomes impossible to catch because he's not slowing down. So I think it actually would take some, you know, race riding tactics by others to get him beat here.
James, same question. Secretariat, widely regarded as the greatest racehorse of all time by many. How does he get beat here?
Yeah, I think it's a 2-part answer. Ed referenced the first part. For whatever reason, Secretariat did not always show up with his best effort. He lost 3 of 10 dirt starts at age 3. The second part would just be like the trip he gets, because he did draw post 3. He's got Seattle Slew and post 5 to his outside. He showed he was tractable early in his career, winning races from off the pace. But once you got to the spring of his 3-year-old season, he became more of a front running type. And you can watch his Preakness race. He takes off after the lead after a slow start, despite Ron Turcotte pulling on the reins. He was able to get away with it against only 5 horses at Pimlico. But in this field, if he's out there chasing Seattle Slew in the early stages, they both would run each other into the ground in my mind. You know, Secretariat, to run his best race, needs to be stalking this hot pace.
Now, Ed, the recency factor is always going to make people biased towards potentially who they choose. And we've seen 2 Triple Crown recent winners in American Pharoah and Justify. How do you think those horses stack up with some of the all-time great Triple Crown winners?
I think they're being undersold based on some of the comments I've seen. I thought Justify's Derby, and as you know, I was as much against Justify as you could be a horse who's going to be the favorite. But he took pressure every step of the way in his Derby, and was the last one standing. He clearly was best of that group, and that group maybe not as good as some of the others we've seen throughout the Triple Crown years. Or firms certainly come to mind, having to battle Alidar, but American Pharoah as well. And he's one of those I think of when you say, okay, are we judging a horse based on up to Derby and how they ran that day, or is their whole career open to discussion? And if you include their whole career, American Pharoah's Breeders' Cup Classic is easily one of the best races I've seen this decade. I think it's better than any one of the Triple Crown races he ran. So if he, runs back to that race specifically, I think he's a lot more dangerous than some people are, giving him credit for.
James Justify, the only Triple Crown winner to retire undefeated, a perfect 6 for 6. Where do you think the two Baffords stack up with the rest here?
I think Justify would be up against it because he only ran for 4.5 months, over 112 days. And in 5 of those 6 starts, he had everything his own way by the far turn. He did show tractability. I'm not worried about that aspect of his run style, but just the lack of seasoning in this kind of field would be a huge concern for me. American Pharoah would have a chance. I mean, at the very least, to grab a minor award, in my opinion. He had more gears than Justify. He, I thought he was a more brilliant winner at times as well. And I look at his Arkansas Derby, the Preakness, the Belmont, and then the Breeders' Cup Classic, like Ed referenced. I just thought he had more of a dimensions than Justify did because he was very lightly raced and didn't have an element of seasoning that all the other 12 Triple Crown winners do possess.
We all know this is horse racing, guys, and pace and trip certainly make the race. It's well known that War Admiral was a terrible gate horse. He postponed the start of the Belmont by 8 minutes. Drawn next to him, Citation and Whirl Away, probably not the best post positions for them, drawn next to War Admiral. But James, let's start with you. You got the post positions. You know what these horses' styles are. How do you see the race playing out? Who's advantaged? Who's disadvantaged? And how do you think it plays out from start to finish?
I think Seattle Slew is going to be setting the pace from post 5. I referenced before, a horse like Affirmed is to his inside. If he goes out there and tries to run with him, he's just basically compromising any chance he has to even hit the board. So I look at Seattle Slew. He ran 108 flat in set a track record at 7 furlongs early in his 3-year-old season, went 108 flat in that race on the lead. He could just flat out fly. He would be in front early. And then you'd have horses to his outside like American Pharoah, War Admiral, if he broke, Count Fleet, Justify, and others looking to set up a close tracking position to him. That would be the real key to the race because if Seattle Slew isn't going head to head with the horse, Joe, he's got a chance to lead wire to wire. If he is banging around with some other speed horse, that's going to compromise his chances and set it up for either a stalker or a late runner.
Do you see it setting up similarly, Ed?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe not a late runner just because the presence of Secretariat makes me think, they may be too far behind when he turns for home. I actually figured to like the trip American Pharoah gets. Now, the Kentucky Derby American Pharoah ran probably wouldn't be good enough. I mean, he was definitely all out, and, Victor was really getting busy to fend off Firing Line and Dortmund. But, I could see Secretariat and American Pharoah sort of turning for home together, like Barbaro and Showing Up in the 2006 Derby. Secretariat's probably going to be too much for Pharoah or any horse, but someone will come from the back of the pack. I mean, we see this almost every year in the Derby. Someone closes. Now, no one's trained by Dallas Stewart, so I can't just punt and take that horse, but I have to think we'll have some late running closer, which should be a decent price because all the short priced horses like to be on the front end.
Whirl Away, vastly known as one of the greatest closers of all time, one of our Triple Crown winners. I had the pleasure of having dinner with Eddie Arcaro during my youth, guys, and he told me Citation would dust Secretariat. And you're talking about one of the greatest jockeys of all time who did get an opportunity to see Secretariat run. Ed, we'll start with you. If it's not Secretariat, if it's not Citation, if it's not American Pharoah, who do you think has the best upset chance?
Of the bombs on the morning line, double-digit odds, I actually would take Justify. And, if we're talking about Justify in the 2018 vacuum where he would be an Apollo horse, so to speak, against this group, no way am I taking him. But if we're thinking, okay, all these horses have been resurrected, they're in training, they've all had their preps, I think he's the potential to be an underlaid horse. I thought his Derby was great given the seasoning. Obviously, we didn't see what he could do beyond the Belmont Stakes and the Triple Crown. But of the other, there's Sir Barton, Omaha, and Assault, I give zero chance to. So, looking at who's left standing of the prices, Justify would certainly shock me the least.
Justify's never lost a horse race, a perfect 6 for 6. James, who's your long shot?
Well, I'll just say, first off, I would definitely be price shopping to see what prices Whirlaway, because you're right about Whirlaway. He was 16 lengths off the pace in 8th when he won the Kentucky Derby by open lengths. He was last of 8 in the Preakness when he rallied to win the second leg by open lengths. He is the most dangerous closer in the field. If I was looking for a bomber, I don't know if any of them could win the race, but I'll tell you a horse I would have on any kind of vertical exotic tickets. It would be Assault. And the reason for that is that I know his form lines overall don't compare favorably to some, but he did his best running early in the season every single year he ran. He won 5 of 6 starts to start 1946, including the Triple Crown. He came back at 4 and he opened up his career with 5 straight wins, won the Brooklyn and Suburban handicaps, which were huge races at the time over distinguished horses. He would tail off at the end of the year every year, but the Derby's the first Saturday of May. Assault's a horse that if he got the right setup, could outperform expectations.
That's a look at the Triple Crown Showdown, again, coming up on Saturday, 5:45 Eastern on NBC. Looking very forward to this virtual race. And don't forget, you can donate to the COVID-19 Relief Fund on the Kentucky Derby website, and you'll receive a promo code that you can use on twinspires.com to opt into the Bet 20, Get 20 promo. And all you have to do is place at least $20 in bets at Oaklawn Park on Saturday, and you'll receive a $20 bonus bet. For Ed DeRosa and James Scully, I'm Joe Christofak. Enjoy the Triple Crown Showdown.